We're in the studio today with Dr. Jack Herron, who's a candidate for the state superintendent job. Jack's running as a Democrat and will be competing in the primary and on into the fall. And Jack, welcome, and we look forward to hearing your views.
Thank you, Doug. I'm looking forward to expressing my views.
I know you've done everything in education, from drive the bus to coach to teach to superintend and all kinds of things, but I want to start out and just ask you to give us, and I know it's extensive, but give us your academic background, including your work experience. And primarily I think the viewers want to know, are you a certified teacher? Have you been? And have you been certified as a superintendent?
Well, backgrounds are very interesting. I grew up, as you know, living on a farm south of Norman here near the town of Lexington. And in my junior year, we moved into Norman. Now, as far as educational background, my grandfather, my grandmother, my aunts, uncles, my mother, my dad, I have cousins all involved in education. So I kind of grew up around that, but truthfully, we were in the cattle business, and I was a good basketball player.
Yeah, I know you were.
So I went to Norman High School and played basketball, and was fortunate to go on to Oklahoma State University and play for Mr. Iva. And that was one of the main reasons I went to Oklahoma State University, being from Norman, Oklahoma.
Right.
And that was something that I've taken a little bit of, what would you call it, razzing about, was the fact that I was from Norman and went to OSU. However, my father-in-law here in Norman, as was your dad, was a dentist.
Right.
And so my initial plans, you know, when you go to college and career days, and I just came from the funeral of Buddy Pendarvis, who was an attorney here in Norman, right. and I used to hear Buddy talk when he'd come to career day at Norman High School. And so I went to OSU and took courses in science and was taking the pre-med, pre-dent courses with every plan to come home and go to dental school. And my father-in-law and I had great plans for his practice. In fact, your dad was one of the people who encouraged me to go to dental school. Yeah. However, what happened is while I was in school, one, I redshirted a year in basketball, so I started taking additional coursework, which I'll run over quickly. And then that was during the Vietnam War, and Uncle Sam wanted me badly. And so I actually joined the Air Force. I got a delayed enlistment program, and the minute that I finished up at OSU, then I went in the Air Force for 3 years, 7 months, and had a great tour in the Air Force. But while I was in school, my parents being teachers, I went ahead and took an approved teacher prep program through OSU, and because I redshirted a year, I did a double major. I'm primarily a science teacher, and I also took enough social studies that I've got 2 certifications. First, I'm a certified superintendent in the state of Oklahoma. I was a superintendent for almost 18 years. I'm a certified principal, secondary principal, which there's an important difference in that if you're secondary versus elementary. And also in the area of science, I've taught high school biology. I'm actually certified in about 16 areas, I think, when you take the certificate and total them up. I've actually taught high school biology, I've taught U.S. government, and I've taught sociology, as well as at various times I've been consulted with regard to Oklahoma history. Oklahoma history is kind of my passion, and I'm certified to teach psychology, and so again, I don't have all those memorized, but when you look on my certificate, you will see that I'm certified in the state of Oklahoma. Further, I had a little advantage there. When I returned from the military and went to graduate school at OU, I was the certification officer for the College of Education.
Okay.
So at that time, I advised all students, from freshmen through graduate students, on what the certification requirements were. So I worked closely at that time, working for OU and with the Oklahoma State Department of Education in helping persons get certified.
Okay. And I also know that you did a stint at the State Department of Education. Tell us what you did. I know you were a financial expert, worked in that area, but what did you actually do when you worked at the State Department?
Well, Sandy Garrett, during her regime, visited with me, and I served under her as the Director of Financial Services, which primarily the main duty there was to put the state aid out. Also at that time we had what was called the education jobs money come down federally, and I devised the system and helped devise it and worked with the governor to put that money out. And then also we had under us, we had what was called OCAS, which is the Oklahoma Cost Accounting System, which accounts for all the expenditures in school funding in Oklahoma. We also had an audit section where I worked with the state auditor on those audits.
Okay, great. Dr. Herron, one of the greatest frustrations, of course, in today's climate among students and teachers and parents is the enormous amount of time that we're spending in class preparing students for testing, for high stakes testing. So we want to know your opinion on, first of all, end of instruction testing, high stake testing, and if you think that's a good thing or not.
Well, I'm going to answer that in a number of ways, because high stakes testing and the testing situation right now is greatly stressing parents, teachers, students, administrators, everyone concerned with education. And I like to say that we are in the punitive stage of what's been happening with all the initiatives in the last 10 years, beginning with No Child Left Behind, beginning with ACE, which is the EOIs and the tests that can keep the students from graduating. Then we've got the reading sufficiency exam, which is stressing those third graders, because if they can't read, they're not going to move on. And then, of course, Common Core, which are buzz terms that we're dealing with. And when you really think about it, when I say the punitive stage, what I mean by that is that if a student doesn't pass those tests, it reflects on the teacher with regard to her evaluation. It reflects on the student with regard to the student passing on. And also what the Common Core does is the testing involved with it requires more and more from students, and it's not taking any accountant or accountants for developmental differences in the students. So as a result, I have a grandson in kindergarten, and I've talked extensively about him. And my daughter and my wife are uptight because the average citizen out there may not totally understand what all this calls for. I've also sat through state board meetings where different schools would come in and have to make appeals because the students were not passing all the EOIs. And then I've sat in there on appeals with regard to reading sufficiency. And so we're just in a very turmoilish time in Oklahoma, and these things have to be worked out.
Well, you mentioned the third grade retention standard that we have now, but also you might comment on, in the last couple of years, we've had a number of high school students that were denied their diploma because they didn't pass all the required tests there at the end. So elaborate on that a little bit, and what, in your opinion, if this is a negative thing that we're getting people in senior and high school and they can't graduate.
Well, it's without doubt negative, and that's why I say a punitive phase, because we've embarrassed students. One of the things with regard to the EOI, you have to pass certain tests to be able to graduate. And one of the main tests is Algebra 1. Mm-hmm. Well, any trained educator knows, if they study stage theory, that different people become available or become able to pass algebra or think abstractly at a certain stage in their life. We don't all hit it at the same time. This is what I mean by developmental differences. So the notion that you're going to take a major test, make your graduation dependent upon it, when you may not have already, or you may not have yet developed to the point where you can understand algebra, that's a big deal. So again, the punitive phase. Now, I'm asked frequently, what are we going to do about it? This is something that when I take office, we've got to collaborate with the experts and collaborate with parents and teachers and everybody. Mm-hmm. And we've got to set the standards that we think we want to live by and we want to go by, and let everybody have something at stake there and have their say. And you certainly got to involve the educators that are experts.
Right. But tell us kind of your feelings about Common Core. Is this a good thing, a bad thing? And if you think it's, if you're against it, tell us why.
Right. I was the first candidate on record to come out and say I was against Common Core. The basic reason I'm against it is I worked for 11 years with a program where you taught advanced placement calculus and physics. So I know what rigor is, I know what high standards are. And I will tell you what I understood to be the Common Core standards. There are some schools excited about that. Well, if they're excited about that, they didn't have very high standards. I think we can do better in Oklahoma. I think we need Oklahoma standards that are set by our persons. And I think that, the whole goal is to help Oklahoma students improve their performance.
Right.
And you know, we've been 3 years in a 4-year contract under the current administration. And if you read what the media says, we're ranked in the bottom 10 in the nation, the bottom 10 schools in the nation in what our academic achievement is. Well, I'm quite confident in saying, I will guarantee you, you give me a 4-year contract, and after 3 years we will show some progress. And the way I'm going to do that is to include what I call math specialists with the reading specialists down at the lower levels. And we will plan the curriculum all the way through to say to the teachers, with the teachers, you know, kicking in, here's what we need to do to improve our student performance. So Common Core really, and people want to think this is a conspiracy theory, it's not. It was developed outside the state of Oklahoma. I think we need to come back to Oklahoma and develop our own standards. Now with regard to the kids graduating, as I said, I've sat up there in the state board meetings and watched school after school make appeals on behalf of their students. And so when I say local control, I think that Broken Arrow School, they've had their students through their system, and Broken Arrow should decide which ones are going to graduate and which ones are not going to graduate.
Right. Okay. This is a very broad question, but do you think that the public schools in Oklahoma are failing the students? And feel free to narrow that down and tell us maybe in what areas we're not doing such a good job in.
First, as you well know, I had lived in Africa as a child, and I've lived in different countries around the world. I've gone to different schools. And Mom and Dad came home, and we children wanted to stay overseas, and we said, why in the world are we going home? And they said, because we want you back in those good Oklahoma schools. We think they will be best for you. So I've gone through a series of my own families, come all the way through Oklahoma schools. Now that doesn't mean we haven't lived around the world, gone other places. But I'm big on Oklahoma schools. We've got great teachers, great schools, and everything. I don't want to hear, you know, in America and in the United States and in Oklahoma, we're charged with educating every student. We don't cut the deck and say, okay, some go to work, some go to the fields, some don't. We try to educate every student. So I think the Oklahoma schools are doing fine. I might say, though, with a little bit of humor, if we failed anywhere in the schools, I think perhaps we haven't done the best job in civics or in government in teaching people that they should go vote and they should take advantage of the freedoms that we have. I'm a veteran, and I believe in those freedoms.
Absolutely.
And so if the schools have failed, we haven't done a good enough job of teaching everybody what government's about.
Right. Well, I agree with you on that. Now, there's been a lot of discussion over the past couple of years on the grading scale that has been implemented, partially anyway, the A to F system, grading school sites as well as the school districts. And tell us, in your opinion, is this a good thing? Are you for this? Or give us your opinion on the whole A through F system.
Okay, and these questions are pretty broad, Doug.
They are, I know.
So that's the way we'll do it. First, I was at the State Board of Education office when they had public participation, invited the public in to comment on the A through F grading before they were ever passed. You know, they had let you comment on it. And chambers of commerce directors came in from all around the state, I won't say all of the state, but from around the state, and said, this is not good policy for economic development. You know, you're going to have some towns, and every city is based on the citizens it has, and education may be more important to some than others, and they may have a little different system. But if a school would happen to get a low grade, then economically, you know, it will be detrimental to their city, because people may want to move over here and buy a house in another area that quote quote has a better grade on their schools. Right. And schools are made up of people. So from an economic development standpoint, it's plain idiocy to go all over the state and have a report card like this. Yep. But back on the report card, we've had really two different report cards as far as the A through F report cards. We had the one the first year. Then this year, or this past year, the legislature tweaked the grading scale and changed it. So to compare schools based on those would probably not be the best thing. And then we've had studies done by university professors saying that you need to do a better job in your research. One thing, though, that people shouldn't lose sight of is if you look at a school and it has a certain grade, down at the bottom it says, here's how they've done on advanced placement, here's how they've done in their performance, here's how they've done on their college readiness, or here's how they've done. And some of them are not good. So, you know, you can look at the data for what you want the data to say. And that may say to you, well, then those teachers in that school or that administration, they need to tweak something because they're doing terrible in science, or they're doing terrible in certain areas. And so that's what's made the report cards interesting to look at. Now, I think we need to eliminate the report card. That would be one of the first things that I would work with the legislature to try to do, and work with the educators and everybody, all the stakeholders again. If we want to have a report card type accountability, we would need to come up with something that pretty well suits everybody, which I think it can be done.
And let's say we did that, or we had a system in place that was say more fair than what we have now. And let's say a school made a bad grade, deservedly so. Talk about in your view, what should the consequences be, or what can we do to help the schools or the districts that are receiving bad grades?
Okay, first I had to answer that question last night at a meeting I went to. I think that was the question, what can you do to improve your school?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, number one on the list is you've got to give the school the resources to be successful.
Right.
We have not, since the current funding formula was founded or was written in 1983, we've never fully funded the formula. And you know, everybody says, well, throwing money at it doesn't work. Not true. There's some things that have had money thrown at it that really works. But when you've never fully funded the funding formula, that needs to be done. The next thing that would be exciting, it's nearly impossible, but it would really be exciting to let different schools, you know, choose their teachers, choose the ones they want to work with.
Yeah.
Of course, as the superintendent, I was always in a position where I could interview each person that worked in our system. The third thing we need to do is, you've got lots of students out there with special needs. And you really, now the way the laws are, you've got to provide them the resources for remediation and all the things that they need to do to be successful, which will require lots of work, but it'll also require lots of resources.
Right. Now let's shift gears and talk a little bit about teacher retirement system, another very broad subject, but I think in terms of what the viewers probably want to know would be your position on the discussions and for new teachers coming into the system.
First, I'll make it clear. I am a retired teacher. I am drawing a pension from the retirement system. I'm drawing a defined benefit plan.
Right.
The idea of doing anything with what we call a defined contribution plan, again, is not sound finance. The basic reason is, and I'll use an example. I imagine when my wife and I were young, and I was a young teacher, and we did move a time or two, and then as I became, you know, an administrator, we moved a little more. But if we would have had something like a defined contribution plan, they say the benefits of that are because if you moved, portability,
right,
we would have probably spent the money, Doug.
Yeah.
The whole facts are we would have spent the money. Now I'll use one of my daughters as an example. She worked in a specific school system in Oklahoma. She worked there 4 years, and then she and her husband moved to the Oklahoma City area and they had a baby. So she laid out for 3 or 4 years while she had her baby. I said, honey, leave your money in the retirement system. You wouldn't want to go back to work one day.
Right.
Well, she left it in. Now she's been back at work for 10 years, so she's got 14, 15, 16 years in the retirement system, and I assure you she's much better off with the defined benefit plan. So I want to assure every teacher out there that one of my goals, and I will fight to the day that I die, will be to retain and hang on to the current teacher retirement system, and also try to work to help see that it's funded and search for sources of revenue streams that can fund teacher retirement.
Okay, great. Now this next question talks about funding, and of course I don't think anybody would say that there are lots of areas in education that are overfunded. But in your perspective, what areas, either in the department or in schools, common schools, are we underfunding to the degree that it's really hampering the kids?
Okay, well first, and you asked me earlier about working in the finance section of the State Department. I actually worked under Sandy Garrett, and then I worked under the current Superintendent Janet Barisi. So I had a lot of resources at my call that I could study every day. And one thing I noticed was about 3 years when oil went to $100 a barrel, 3 years ago, oil went to $100 a barrel, and it was my feeling that this is good because this should throw more money into the general revenue fund for the state, and maybe we'll catch back up and have a little bit of money. Well, what happened at the time, as I have been told, was they began what they call the horizontal drilling refund or rebate, and actually took the amount of money from 7% that they were doing for horizontal drilling down to 1%.
Right.
That has been billions of dollars, Doug. And that's money that if it were into the revenue fund, the general revenue fund, could have been important over the last 3 or 4 years. I feel this year, before the year's up, I know that there's legislators looking at improving this, and also the governor's looking at improving this and everything. But if we were to have those revenue streams where we could improve the funding for schools and give them the resources, then I think it's going to do a lot of the things that you're asking about on how are we going to improve schools.
Right.
Now, Monday, this coming Monday, is the rally day at the Capitol.
Right.
And I already know for a fact that one of the persons who's given a funding talk that day, number one on his list is going to be that 7% with regard to the horizontal drilling.
Right. Dr. Herron, give us your views on charter schools in general, and I want to ask you specifically about the way we evaluate charter school teachers. But charter, of course, has made lots of advancements in the last few years. We have more charter schools than we did, and it's kind of a recent phenomenon. But as an educator looking back, what's your view on charter schools?
I haven't looked today, but the number of schools in Oklahoma is about 520 regular schools, and in the neighborhood of 20, 22, 23 charter schools, with some charter schools on the burner to be developed right now. While in the Department of Education, one of the things I had to do was we did charter school training. So I would do my financial part for the charter schools. And there's a lot of things that charter schools have to do just right along with the normal public schools. My problem with charter schools is the teachers don't have to be certified. And I don't care, saying you're highly qualified, if you don't have an Oklahoma certification or an Oklahoma certificate, then you're not certified. So that's something that really has to be done. They have to be certified. They have to hand in a personnel report to the State Department of Education, just like the other schools do. They have to hand in an estimate of needs. Now, I've gone and researched this, and I've visited some charter schools. Some of them do it. Some of them don't do it. Some of them have certified teachers. Some of them don't have certified teachers. So there's legislation up this year that asks charter schools to meet all the requirements that all the other schools do. Now, one of the other hot topics now is the TLE, the Teacher Leader Evaluation.
Right.
And I will tell you for a fact, when I've checked on some charter schools, they are not doing the same TLE that the regular schools are. As a result, I feel their teachers are kind of getting a free ride, where the other 520 schools in the state are doing the TLE by law. And as a result, their teachers are under stress and uptight.
Right. And that actually was the next question, which you've already answered, which was that teachers at charter schools are not subject to the other evaluation through TLE that normal public school teachers are, and I think you did a good job answering that. Now, let me ask you a personal question, because character, as you know, is a big issue among politicians and educators, and it is to students and parents as well. But having said that, have you ever been convicted of any kind of a crime?
No.
Okay. I didn't think so, but I wanted to.
Well, that's why
sure
those issues I like to answer it that way.
Absolutely. Okay. Now, just kind of as we wrap up here, Dr. Herron, share with us your views long-term for the State Department, if you were running it, and also just for public education in general. I know that's a broad question as well, but where would you like to see the State Department go under your leadership?
Well, first, and I've been in a leadership position long enough to remember when the State Department was there to help you and not hammer you. So my first goal is that it become a help you agency and not a hammer you agency. And we will do that almost immediately. I've jokingly said as I've been out, we want someone up there to answer the phone when you call, and if you need help, we will answer the phone. We want someone that knows when to post agendas and how to post agendas so that we don't move the meeting off to another town and find out that we didn't post the agenda right. Now those are things, but they're really important.
Right.
I think that we need someone who knows what the FFA is. There have been times when I'm not sure they knew what the FFA was, or the what Future Homemakers of America,
right,
or any of these different types of things. Really, while I was there, I deliberately went and studied other sections, not only the finance section. I would go down and do research in the other departments, because having come from the schools and been out in the schools, the K-12 schools, I thought, there's a lot I want to learn up here about how they really do things. And so I deliberately went to other sections and other departments to watch and get an idea. And I think they also came to me because I had some new ideas in finance, and they want to know how the finance department worked in the financial aid section. So there's a learning curve in this particular job when you get elected. And you be elected in November, you don't take office till January, you've got to do a lot of things immediately. And I will tell you, if a person goes in there cold, that's not been in there in a supervisory capacity, I don't care, they can say all you want about delegating or getting somebody to go do that, there's a learning curve. Well, I don't think I will have that learning curve. The other thing I've done, Doug, as you well know, I've had a hand in working at the legislature, knowing and understanding and consulting with the right people about how things work over there. I think the legislators know me. I think they have confidence, you know, when I present before them or ask questions. I think it would be really fun to, in November, the minute the election's over, to put you a team together of educators, citizens, business persons, and develop a plan and say, okay, what do we want to do? Now that's in November because you got to work fast.
Right.
Then in January, develop our legislative plan. Have it developed before then, but in January, go to the legislature and say, okay, here's what we want to do in the finance area. Here's some things we've got to do. Here's some rules and laws we've got to change. And then when everything starts and the legislature starts in February, wouldn't it be fun to have their support and have all this done? And maybe before May the 25th or the last Friday in May, we could have some of these things achieved.
Right.
So that's idealistic. But I've had people come up to me and say, you know, my friends, and say, oh, Jack, you can't do that stuff. Well, let me tell you, I've been studying this, and I was studying while I was in there, and I've been studying it since then. And it's just like a teacher pay raise, you know, is one of my top priority items. I know where there are some revenue streams, both within the current education budget and some revenue streams in other areas of the agency where I think that without, you know, gaining any additional revenues, you know, we could commit that to the schools and then they can use it any way that they want to. Right. So I'm pretty confident that all these things can be done. Yeah. But a person has got to start immediately, you know, the day the election's over to get it done. And if you don't have a person who has managed a K-12 school, who has that leg up when they go in to know how to run the different departments, I think again we're back where maybe we've been the last several years.
And you might want to comment on this briefly as well, but I know that when those budget meetings begin to happen in late January, early February, and you are called into the House and Senate Education Budget Committees to present the case for your budget and to be an advocate for those type things, that's something that you have to be very well prepared in and well versed in and know how to present that before the legislative body.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that. I had surgery last year. As you well know, you visited me in the hospital, but as we were wheeling down the hallway to the surgery room, I asked my doctor, I said, did you bring your A game today? And he said, Jack, I always bring my A game. Well, as you know, there in the Capitol, I have to bring my A game every day.
Right.
Because when you're in these budget hearings or these committee meetings, many times they'll turn to me and say, Dr. Herron, what do you think about this? The state school board, the question was, do they have to do continuing education requirements like a normal school board member out in a school district? Well, the answer is, as I think of continuing education, is those school board members have to go get so many points. They have to go, you know, almost yearly and take from some training area to get points. And so the answer was no, the state school board doesn't have to do that. However, after it was over, I went to the attorney because she had access to her computer. Believe it or not, we learned that a newly elected state or newly selected state school board member has to go through so many hours of training with the State School Board Association when they're first elected.
Right.
So those are just the little things. But on funding and finance and everything, I have done those for so many years. And you've always got to be careful, though, because Title 70 governs Oklahoma schools. And everybody wants to compare all the other laws and all the other, you know, the county commissioners and everything to schools. And you've got to have a real knowledge of Title 70.
Right.
So saying that you've got a finance course from Harvard or somewhere in public finance, you better have had a course in Oklahoma school finance to know what exactly you were talking about. Right. And so there's just so much to do and so much to know. And if you're going to really be good at your job, you need to study it. It's like, you know, you want a brain surgeon doing your brain surgery. Well, you want someone who really knows what you're doing up there in the agency. And so somebody said to me, well, why are you running? Well, I'm running because I think it's time we put somebody in there who has the training and the expertise that knows what they're doing.
Great. Our guest is Dr. Jack Herron, who's a candidate for State Superintendent of Schools. And Dr. Herron, in closing, is there anything else that you would like to say to the viewers or talk about in terms of, you already mentioned why you're running, but just in closing, anything else you'd like to share with us?
Well, the campaign has been a very interesting journey. and I've been head to head with others and everybody you think of, and the main thing, everybody tells me nobody gets elected on their credentials. Well, I think it may be time that we do look at credentials and really look at who has trained and who's done what, because it's critical. Never in my lifetime have I seen the schools and the school situation, whether it's common ed, higher ed, career tech, never has our state been in such turmoil and been so upset over all of these issues. And as I said again, down to parents, students, teachers, administrators, everybody in general is really stressed right now. And so we've got great schools, we've got great teachers, we've got great people. We got to straighten it out. And I will say to everyone, we're going to change the culture right now.
Great. Thank you for coming in, Dr. Herron.